Melissa, if you'd like to take over next. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm having a bit of a tech mare here, so I'm not going to be able to share my slides properly, but I put it into Microsoft just normal mode, so I hope you can see the slides. My computer crashed when I tried to share my screen previously, so let's go over this. My name's Melissa Terras. I'm a professor of digital cultural heritage at the University of Edinburgh, and for the past 20 years I've been interested in the digitisation of cultural heritage, but also how that's used. And so I'm part of this project to look at the use of IIIF and how we can encourage more people, more institutions, more groups to adopt it. So that's also about building demonstrators which are usable, but it's also looking at it more holistically. So that's why I put the word holistic in the title there. It's not just about us as a project building things that work, it's also about how we move things along. So, many people will be aware of the technology adoption life cycle, which is one of these things that management journals like wheel out all the time. This is one a picture stolen from one of them online. It's about how we move from a technology that's exciting or useful to being adopted by a much larger constituency. And this is where we want to get to with the Towards a National Collection project, right? IIIF is now 10 years old. It has now got wonderful institutions worldwide who have adopted it. But we haven't yet, I think, we haven't yet crossed the chasm. And we saw that earlier with a question from someone, where do you get started? How do you get involved? How do you become one of the pragmatists who wants to actually take this stuff, the really great work that's been done? And I'm not putting any slights on any of the people in the IIIF consortium by saying this, but how do we get from this fantastic work which exists and being able to deploy it in a way which increases the use of IIIF across the national collection broadly framed. So that's where we are, and that's what we're trying to do in this project, and it's my role to try and to help this along a bit. So, how are we going to do that? The first thing we need to do really is round up the decade of work that's been done so far on IIIF and users. So, there has been a decade of work. There's lots of good stuff in the IIIF conferences. There's also institutional reports, project reports, and conference papers, and other places like museums and the web. And there hasn't been a synthesization yet of all of that stuff into one, like what are people saying about users, what are people saying about adoption. So that's one of the first things that we're going to do. The second thing is that we're going to ensure that user testing is embedded into the different demonstrator design from the different things that we're going to try and do with the project. So we're going to use these as case studies, and the user study RA will be a resource that the project can draw down upon to try and make sure that there's user testing embedded, making sure that we're always thinking about expanding the use of IIIF throughout the Towards the National Collection project, and making sure that both the projects we're developing and the other related projects who are drawing down on IIIF can actually think about putting the user at its heart, and putting not the expert user, not the technical user, but putting the end user, whether that's a curator who doesn't really know so much about it, or whether that is actually someone at home trying to access digital cultural heritage. So there's a bit of a conversation to be had there. But we need to understand our user community a bit better too. So we need to build a user cohort for beta testing, for feedback. There's various mechanisms, various ways that you can do that, and of course that's dependent on the situation we're in just now, whether that's online or offline. And it's going to be really useful to the project and towards a national collection project overall to get that user cohort who are willing to look at stuff and give us honest, sometimes brutal feedback that can help us encourage the uptake of this technology. And that, all of these things together should, by the end of this a couple of years, then mean that we have recommendations for increasing the uptake of IIIF across various collections. And I suspect that that will involve looking at our communications as well as how we can build infrastructures to increase adoption. And it will also mean that we have to be talking to the other Towards a National Collection foundational projects and the ones which are about to be funded in the next phase to make sure we're understanding where the user sits amongst this, where the barriers are for adoption, and what we can do using the expertise which now exists in the IIIF community to make sure that the fantastic opportunities and potentials that we've seen here today can be used across a much wider constituency. So what we want to do is take IIIF from being that early market bit of tech that's used by enthusiasts and visionaries, and turn it into something which is embedded into pragmatists, conservative users, and also some of the skeptics, right? I think in lots of ways the past year, the amount of the switch to online that we've all been dealing with has done a massive favour for digital cultural heritage, because people have realised the benefit of digitisation, the benefit of shared resources, and the benefit of structuring data in a way which is easy to navigate. So we should be building on that to make sure that the infrastructure is good, so we can move forward and expand that even further. I haven't asked Joe if I can say this, but we are going to be hiring in this space for someone to do user studies. So if you do know folks, tell them to watch the project, tell them to watch the project Twitter feed and my Twitter feed and Joe's Twitter feed, and we will be putting out a job advert for the RA who's going to be doing this user work soon. And I hope that's given a snapshot of what our ambitions are for embedding users within this, and we'll be reaching out to folks who are here today to actually ask you about some of your user things too when the time comes. Thank you very much.